Hi, I'm Rachel Abbasi. Welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. As always, thanks for spending time with me.
Hello, thanks for joining me. I have a little puppy on my lap, and I'm gonna just move the camera ever so slightly so you can see her laying on my lap. She's so precious. That's Autumn. And she has decided she wanted to hang out with me for the podcast. Actually, I was breaking the rules and looking at the Kohl's website because I got a 30% off discount. So I was wondering what I need to buy with my free money, I mean, come on, it's not free money. I'm still spending money, but whatever. So I decided, since I can't get up because I have a puppy on my lap, I would go ahead and record for today. What I wanted to talk about is step one in vestibular recovery. This isn't something that I've talked about before. So I talk a lot about my sobriety and I apply it to my stroke recovery, but not everyone who has a vestibular disorder has it as the result of a stroke. So I wanted to, but still, it still feels, you know, it's the same kind of like acceptance process that we have to go through and all of that difficult stuff. So I wanted to talk about how I can take step one in my sobriety and apply that same structure to vestibular recovery. So there's something that I heard recently. I was listening to an audio about self-compassion. And I don't know if I shared this last week or not. And if I did, I apologize, but I'm going to share it again. It's real quick. What I heard was the person that was speaking was talking about how you can try this exercise to envision self compassion and how like trying to control leads us down this path of frustration. So what she said was just clench your fists together and just keep a tight fist and just keep clenching them tightly. And after about 30 seconds, it happens every time I do it. After about 30 seconds of just continuing to clench your fists, what do you feel like on the inside? Do you feel like, for me, I feel tension building. I feel frustration. I feel it right here in my chest. I just want to let go. I don't want to keep that effort continuous. Like I notice the strain and I get really frustrated when I continue to clench my fists. So then now release your fists and wiggle your fingers. And then put your hands down on your lap or your desk or your table, wherever you are right now. Unless you're driving, don't put your hands down. And put your palms face up and just sit there now for 30 seconds with your palms face up. And notice what you feel like inside now compared to how you felt when you were clenching your fist. And it's that like kind of relief, right? It's relief not feeling like I'm holding on to anything and feeling like I'm just open. Like whatever happens, happens. That's what I feel like on the inside. And then the last thing the speaker said was to put one palm, one hand on your chest, and then put the other hand on top of that hand. So you have two open palm hands resting on your chest and just Sit like that for 30 seconds and feel the warmth. I mean, what I'm feeling right now is cold because my fingers are cold, but feel that that comfort, that feeling of like gentle pressure on your chest, like it almost feels like there's somebody else there, you know? I feel warm, even though my fingers are cold. I feel warmth and warmth on the inside. And I really felt like this little exercise, you can release your hands now. I felt like this exercise really displayed for me what it feels like in my mind when I'm trying to force something that I don't have control over. Um, and that includes this disability that I have. When I'm trying to go on the Kohl's website and scroll and look at earrings that I can't afford, even if I have a 30% discount. And I'm doing something that I know better that I'm not supposed to do because it causes symptoms. And those symptoms range from a headache to nausea to me not being able to find words and having a difficult time talking. I get brain fog really easily when my symptoms start activating. So these these displays of like holding, trying to hold on to something that I don't have control over is really resonating with me. And that ability to like let go, to open my palms and allow life to happen, like accept that I can't control anything outside of my fingertips. And then, um, and then recognizing that when I take care of myself, when I choose self-compassion, then I feel freer to love myself and love my life, no matter what limitations I have. So, um, vestibular disorders, sorry, Autumn's deciding she needs to move around. Um, so living with this invisible struggle with the vestibular disorder is really difficult in that I don't know about you if you suffer from a vestibular disorder, but when somebody says, well, you look fine, if I'm like, I remember sitting in the kitchen with my mom and my sister, and I said, um, they said, well, how are you doing? And I was like, well, I feel terrible, you know? And the response I got back was, well, you look good. It wasn't you look fine. They weren't discounting what I was saying. But the response back was clear to me that I didn't, it just reminded me that what's going on the inside of me, no matter how off I feel, or in pain, or dizziness, or disorienting, the visual overwhelm, the fatigue, like all of the stuff that I'm dealing with, and that's not just physically, but also emotionally, like my fears. I have a lot of fear since I had my stroke. And I think more so than I even talk about on this podcast, but that fear and frustration and that sometimes feeling of isolation that I still do to myself sometimes is something that nobody else can see. And and that's hard. it can become overwhelming sometimes when I feel like I sometimes I can wake up and be ready for the day and be like, oh, it's going to be a beautiful day. It's going to be sunny outside. I'm going to go to my AA meeting and then I'm going to paint and I'm going to write my book, and I have these things that I want to do. And then I'm going to connect with people. Oh, I'll call my mom. I need to call my friend who I haven't talked to in a long time. And then there's other days, or even the second half of that same day, all of a sudden I start almost imploding. I start feeling isolated, and it's of my own doing. And the only way for me to get out of that is with work. It's hitting record on this podcast and being like, okay, let's revive that connection that is so good for you. But when I'm feeling just tired of feeling, I'm feeling tired of feeling. I'm tired of being tired, that kind of stuff. That's what creates that pull. It's almost like a pull into isolation. And so when I think about step one, which is in sobriety, it's admitting that my life is unmanageable, is so easily applicable to this experiencing day to day with this disorder. Because I need to wake up in the morning and I need to acknowledge and accept every day. I can't I can't skip acceptance on any day. I have to wake up and say, yes, I am a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. And grateful is the most important part of that reminder to myself, because even though my instinct is to push through and act normal and go out on a walk with my dog, even though I don't feel good. Like, that's my instinct. I still need to do that work on the inside between my ears. I can't build a new life while pretending that nothing has changed. I need to be honest with myself and accept that if I try to do things the way that I was doing them before my disorder, um, life is going to be unmanageable. I can't keep doing things at the level that I was doing them before. So I need to accept that I am disabled. And even saying that now, I just had an epiphany this very moment, because when I go into an AA meeting, before I share, I say, I'm Rachel, I'm an alcoholic. I might be, I might be well to what? I don't know how to phrase this. I might be, I could benefit from, how about that? I could benefit from repeating that on a daily basis, that I'm Rachel and I'm disabled. It's not because that's my identity. And that's something I learned in my brief stay in Celebrate Recovery, was that it was important in Celebrate Recovery that you don't identify yourself as an alcoholic or as a disabled person or whatever it is that you suffer from. You don't want to identify your person as that. Like, that is not your identity. I don't really get terribly caught up in this whole thing about how you phrase it. It's not, that's not as important to me as on the inside accepting that these are my challenges in life. And despite them, I am choosing to live. So, admitting powerlessness over my vestibular disorder, that my life became unmanageable. And it did. I was trying to work and I couldn't do it. I couldn't look at my computer. Today, I can look at my computer um, about as much as my doctor told me in the very beginning after my stroke to only spend X amount of time on my computer. And that's what I would do. Like, I would spend, I think, 15 minutes on the computer and then take a 2 hour break. That pretty much never changed. No matter what I tried to do over the course of 2 years after I had my stroke and ended up with this vestibular disorder, um, no matter how much I tried to train myself and go through vision therapy and vestibular therapy, and I was really good in the beginning about doing 15 minutes on, 2 hours off. And my boss was great about letting me slowly acclimate and learn how to look at the computer again. And so I just kept growing in that direction, like increasing the amount of time to look at the computer and decreasing the amount of time that I would rest because that's what I was told I'm supposed to do. What I didn't really admit to during that time that I was trying to train my brain to look at the computer more was that the more I was shifting to being on the computer more, the more my head was hurting. It was not, Boris just barked. It's okay, Boris. I'm okay. So no matter, it wasn't working. Therapy wasn't working. The advice that doctors were giving me wasn't working. And I wasn't confident enough in my own experience and my own health to admit that. And I ended up, it took 2 years, but I got to the point where I literally could not look at the computer. I had to shut the computer. I couldn't even look people in the eyes at that point. It hurt for me to even move my eyes. I just had my eyes closed or looking at the ground all the time. It was terrible. It was terrible pain. And slowly, over the course of now it's been 2 years. I, yeah, now it's been something like 2 years. I don't know anymore. 3 years. I think it probably gonna be, I guess it's been 2.5 years since I had to leave my job because of my disability and the pain. But I have finally gotten back to the point where I was when I started, which is I can look at the computer and I look at the computer and it's still, it's like I'm in a fog 24/7. And that's a brain fog, it's a cognitive fog, it's a visual fog. It's really hard to explain, but that's what I feel like. And it feels the way that it did in the very beginning. So I got to that point of unmanageability and shut my computer. And what that looked like for me was absolute defeat. I felt like I was just a failure. I felt like because the doctors were telling me what I should be able to do, and I couldn't do it. I was constantly pushing myself past my limits and trying to be my old self, and I was ignoring my body's signals. I felt like I wasn't doing it right. And I felt like my disability, the pain, everything that I was experiencing, I felt like it was my fault. Um, I realized, like, intellectually, I know that the stroke was not my fault, but the aftermath of the stroke, this vestibular disability, and I know that other people feel the same as me because I've heard it in my support group, which thankfully is in an hour and 15 minutes because I love these people. But I felt like I should be able to do something to fix myself. That, I'm with like, for another example, my family is going to be getting together this summer at my brother's new vacation house, and I can't go. It's too much. It's just too much, and it's too painful. And, and I can't do that. And I feel on the inside, like, emotionally, I feel bad. I feel like I should be able to do something to make it manageable for me to be able to go on this trip. It's probably, like, I don't know, 7 hours away or something like that. I can't ride in a car that long. I just simply can't. It would be terrible. It would be terrible. It would be like being on a boat in the Chesapeake during a hailstorm for 7 hours. Like, it just would be absolutely a terrible experience. And I feel bad about that. And I shouldn't feel bad. So, what I need to do in that situation is practice acceptance. So, step one is something that I need to revisit every day, and I need to revisit it in all the situations that I encounter. So recognize that I am powerless over my disability. And that might, when people who are disabled might hear that, I don't know if it would rub you the wrong way or not. But what I mean by that is I can't change it. Yes, I've gone to the therapies and the doctors and all of these things. But I am at the point where I know that if I do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to experience these symptoms. And I'm not in control of my symptomatic reactions to my physical actions, behavior, movement of my eyes, and stuff like that. But I am responsible for how I respond to them. And that is really interesting. So I don't have control over my symptoms, but I do have control over my pace, how quickly do I do things, my environment, what do I place myself in, what environment do I place myself in? What do I allow myself to be exposed to? My routines, and my choices for how I'm going to treat my body in recovery. So instead of trying to control my brain that has parts of it that are broken, permanently broken, instead of trying to control it, because I can't, I will support it instead. So understanding what my responsibility is. And that is what, if I look back to sobriety, that's what I needed to do. Like, understand my role and my responsibilities in recovery. So practicing the tools of what I've learned in sobriety for vestibular recovery is number one, pause. Pause is a huge thing that I do in my sobriety, and it comes through so easily in vestibular recovery too. When I feel like my symptoms are increasing, stop. Stop. And this is as important as this is, the pause, it's the hardest thing for me to practice because if I'm doing something that's triggering my head, most likely I'm enjoying it. Not the symptoms, I'm enjoying the thing that I'm trying to do because the things that trigger my head are the things that I don't get to do, right? So it's the things that I want to do, but I have to walk a fine line. So pushing myself, there's two parts to pushing myself in vestibular recovery. And I learned this from my vestibular therapist. Excuse me. I can push myself to the point of I have to look at it as a scale of 1 to 10. I can push myself to a 5 and then rest and then allow myself to drop back down to about a 3. And then I can push myself a little bit more up to a 5 and then rest and then allow it to go back down. Let my system settle. If I try to push past the 5, I am not speed healing myself. And that's what I used to think. I used to think that, well, if I do this exercise for vestibular therapy and it's supposed to help me, then why would I want to just go to a 5? Like, let's go all the way to a 10 and then we'll come back. Not a 10. 10 would be me passing out. I've always classified a 10 as I actually fall over. I've never done that, but I've gotten to a 9 where I feel like I'm about to fall over. So I always thought, well, why don't I just push myself to an 8 and then settle my system and then I'll heal faster. That's not true. What that does is it delays my healing. It gets me in that place where I was when I was in denial and I was not accepting that I had the disability at all. So what I need to do is recognize that pause, and I almost have to feel like that pause is like the big red button right beside me, and I always need to have my hand on it and just know when I'm doing something, if I start feeling, because sometimes it can happen like that, and know that when I start feeling my symptoms, just push my hand on the button, almost like I'm on Family Feud. Push my hand on the button. So number one is the pause. That's one of the tools that I use in vestibular recovery. Another one is what can I do? And this is like, instead of focusing on all the things that I can't do anymore, focus on what I can do. And this helped me in sobriety because as soon as I had to stop drinking, I thought, well, I can't hang out with these friends anymore. I can't go to happy hour anymore. I can't go to weddings anymore. I can't go to parties. I can't have a kegger. I can't, all the things that I used to do. I can't do it anymore. That was not a healthy way for me to practice early sobriety. And honestly, I wasn't going to live a life of grateful recovery if I was constantly thinking about what I can't do. What I ask today is what I can do. And I will tell you, just on the road of recovery, like sobriety, I can do so much more than I used to be able to do. So, what I thought I was losing back then when I quit drinking, I've actually gained so much more in my life. That's just a side note from sobriety. As far as vestibular recovery, this has been difficult. I'm still in it. I'm only a couple years into accepting that I have a vestibular disorder. So I'm still learning how to say to myself, okay, we just moved to a neighborhood that's on a lake. I can't go in a boat. So instead of focusing on, I can't ride in a boat, what can I do? I can paint the lake. I can paint a boat on a lake. And I'm saying that that's in my mind right now because I'm looking at my big painting that I'm still working on. That is a picture of Autumn, who you saw earlier in the episode, and she's jumping off of a dock into the lake. And that's the kind of thing that allows me to experience still the happy feelings about living where I do, even though I can't necessarily get on the lake. So, what can I do today? What supports my brain today? Gentle movements, shortening my tasks, and resting without feeling like I'm less than. Because that's what happens sometimes when I'm like, I gotta lay down. And then the third tool that I'll share with you is boundaries. And this kind of crosses over with the first one, but not forcing myself through the dizziness and not forcing myself in through the overstimulated brain and comparing myself to who I was. Boundaries. I am making the decision that I'm not going to go to my family summer vacation together that they're going to have together because this is my own boundary that I need to draw to protect my energy, respect my limits, and adjust my, actions, adjust my life to accommodate for my chronic pain without feeling shame. And that is self-care. So the one of the things that I really love about Stroke Onward, which is an organization that I've gotten very friendly with, that I've talked about quite a few times on the podcast, is that they focus on rebuilding your identity after stroke. So people with a vestibular disorder who did not have it, or who did not acquire it because of a stroke, they wouldn't necessarily run across this organization called Stroke Onward. And that's why I think it's important to tell about that mission that this organization has, because when we experience some major health event like this, those emotions, it's always the doctors focus on the physical part, the physical healing, and the emotions are just as real as the physical damage. The grief and the frustration and even resentment, like those are valid. And I hear a lot of times in my vestibular recovery about PTSD, and I was never sold on that. I think I've even talked about it in the podcast once, maybe twice.
about PTSD in vestibular recovery. And I wasn't really sold on that, but I recently listened to someone talk about it in the Vestibular Disorders Association conference that happened this month. This month? Yeah, earlier this month. Somebody was talking about the affiliation, how PTSD and vestibular disorders, like how, what that journey is like. So, anyway, the recovery from any major health event, including stroke and vestibular disorder, if I don't focus on the emotional side of the recovery, it gets louder and louder and louder while I try to focus on the physical side of my recovery. And that is me, it's me lacking acceptance. That's what it feels like. Acceptance really quiets the chaos between my ears just enough so that I can breathe, you know, that I can get patient, that I can even consider pausing. Because when I get really frustrated, that's when I start pushing myself to do the things that I can't do. And and so it's just like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? If I push myself physically, then I'm pushing myself emotionally, and it just ends up that I'm in this cycle and I'm not healing and I'm getting worse. So, I like to think about a lot is what symptoms am I fighting instead of working with them? And this is emotionally and physically. What am I fighting? And I mean symptoms of dizziness, nausea, head pain. What of those, which of those am I fighting? And then frustration and grief and sadness. Which one of those emotional symptoms am I fighting? Am I trying to control something that I can't? Am I trying to push myself past my limits, and that's only going to affect me down the road? So my symptoms, I don't know about you, but my symptoms show up about 5 minutes after I exposed myself to something that triggers them. Um, and don't our emotions happen that way too? Because if I don't address, if I, for example, if I get in a conversation with somebody and somebody responds to me in a way that is questionable, by that I mean, if I spend some time thinking about it later, I start getting irritated, or I start feeling like I start thinking, well, that was offensive. When initially I didn't think what they said offended me, but later I start thinking about it and I'm like, well, that was offensive. Our emotions can be affected later also. So it's important for me to always try to live in the present, to have my mind where my feet are, is what I like to call it. So, how do I support myself right now, right where I am right now? And that can look like, gosh, you name it. Some days what that looks like is I need to lay down. Other days that means I need to go outside and get some fresh air. Other times that means I need to get my paintbrush out and start painting. So I like to have a lot of self-reflection and always try to either keep my hand. I feel like I'm constantly either trying to rest those palms open and and replicate that feeling emotionally of letting go. Because letting go isn't giving up on myself, but it is not clenching. So trying not to control the things that I can't control. And then other times I feel like I've got those palms on my chest, and those are times of when I decide I need to take a nap, when I decide I need to put some classical music on and paint my picture of my lake. So there's different kinds of self-care that I try to focus on a daily basis, but without acceptance, without recognizing where I am, who I am, what I want to be, and where I want to be, I can't practice self care and self compassion. Um, I am still learning how to live differently. And learning how to live differently, folks, that still counts as moving forward. And that doesn't feel like it sometimes. It doesn't feel like when I'm changing course that I'm moving forward. It feels like I'm sitting still, but that's not the case. Um, Switching directions is still moving. Yeah. So, thanks for listening. I hope you got a lot out of this because it's been really helpful to me. I do focus a lot on the stroke and the sobriety, but I don't talk a lot about the symptoms. And so this has been very helpful. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next time.